Have you ever felt stuck on a problem, turning it over and over in your mind, only to realise the usual solutions just aren't working? Welcome to the Undercurrent Stories podcast. I'm Bob Wells, and today we're diving beneath the surface of the way we think, solve problems, and create new possibilities. I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Sloane, author of The Art of Unexpected Solutions. Paul has spent decades exploring how creativity, lateral thinking and fresh perspectives can unlock answers hiding in plain sight. In our conversation, we explore why so many of us default to predictable thinking and how we can train ourselves to see what others miss. Whether you're navigating a mid-career pivot, launching something new, leading a team, facing a personal crossroads, or simply just trying to make better decisions in everyday life, this episode offers practical insights that you can apply right now. The ideas we discuss aren't just for one stage of life, i.e. mid-career, they're valuable for wherever you are in your life's journey. So if you're ready to challenge your assumptions, expand your thinking, and discover the power of unexpected solutions, and have a bit of fun, you're in the right place. Sit back, enjoy the show. Now let's get started. Hello, welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Bob. Great to be here.
In fact, I think it's welcome back to the show. It was about 3 years ago that we had you on before.
Yes.
You got your new book out, The Art of Unexpected Solutions, which your publisher very kindly sent me. I've really enjoyed the book. It's a fantastic book. What inspired you to write this particular book, Paul?
Well, I've always been interested in lateral thinking and innovation, and I've written other books on lateral thinking and innovation, as you know. And I was interested in one aspect of it, which is how the unexpected, the accident, the mistake often triggers a remarkable outcome. And we see it time and time again. And there are many, many stories, and they're interesting stories. And it's not just invention. It's not just in science and in business. It's throughout our lives. I realized I started to examine this and look for more and more examples. And I've got many, many examples in the book. It's called The Art of Unexpected Solutions. And if you look back at your own life, I think you'll find, most people do, that many of the most interesting things that have happened to you, the turning points in your life, were often the result of an accident, a chance meeting, something that happened that was unexpected, unpredicted, and it shaped your life. And it gave you a new career, or you met your future partner, or something like that in an unexpected way. And yet, we tend to think that we can control our lives, and we search for certainty. And we shouldn't. We should welcome the unexpected, and a lot of the book's about that.
Well, it certainly has a lot about it. And one of the themes that you start off with, and it sort of travels through the book, is serendipity.
Yes.
And I think we've probably all got our own idea of what serendipity is, coincidence, etc. How would you define serendipity, Paul?
Well, serendipity is a happy set of circumstances which result in some kind of beneficial outcome. So we can have unexpected things which are unpleasant. We can trip over and break an arm or a leg or something. That you wouldn't call that serendipity. But if you bump into an old friend, as I did once, and he says, Paul, are you free? I've got a job opportunity that I think might be interesting for you. That is serendipity. And it happens, and it affects all our lives to some extent or other. And yet, we can create the conditions where that's more likely to occur than not. And this is one of the themes in the book, that although serendipity, you can't predict when it might happen, you can help create the conditions in which it is more likely to happen.
And you mentioned about spurning certainty and control in favour of serendipity. And I guess there's a bit of a paradox there, because we're brought up to always want to be in control, empowered and everything, to do everything. And yet you're suggesting that we actually need to spurn that. How can we sort of balance those two themes?
I'm not saying throw control out of the window. I'm not saying don't plan for anything. No. But don't think that you can plan your whole life. I mean, we tend to think we go to school, work at school, pass your exams, go to university, get a degree, get a good job, on track. But life isn't like that, really, the rest of life. You can work a plan, but very often life departs completely from the plan. And Eisenhower said about the D-Day, he said, the plans were terrible, but the planning was very useful. So it didn't turn out as they planned, but the fact that they had planned was useful. So planning is fine, but just be prepared to adapt to the circumstances. and be prepared to recognize that your plans are not going to come into fruition likely, but you can switch and do something else. And there are many, many examples. Slack, which is a very popular application, the company that made it was a games company, and the games company failed. The games just didn't work, but they realized the internal tool that they'd used to communicate within the company was very handy, and they sold that as a product, and it became a very successful product. So it was a complete byproduct of their plan. Their plan was to produce a good, successful game. That plan failed, but as an unexpected outcome, they ended up with Slack.
And how can we make ourselves aware or open to these types of situations when, as I said before, we've got this fixation about being in control and in power? How do we open our minds up? Because I see some people, something fails and they get irate about it and lambast themselves and all the rest of it. But you're very, you keep it nice and open. How can people achieve that, do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, when something unexpected happens, don't get annoyed, get curious. What caused that? So, William Greatbatch was working on a circuit to actually measure heartbeat, and he put in the wrong component, the wrong resistor, and he produced something which actually mimicked a heartbeat. And the heart pacemaker was the result of an accident, but he was smart enough to realize that this is an opportunity. And the same with Alexander Fleming and the discovery of penicillin. When he came back from holiday, he found one of his Petri dishes had developed a mold which was resistant to bacteria. And instead of saying, oh, that's an annoyance, there's a dirty Petri dish, I'm going to have to wash them out now, he studied it. And then he went on to discover something which has saved millions of lives. So it's being prepared to accept that anything unusual that happens is an experiment. It's input, it's data, and we should examine it. The other thing which I say is that the routine is the enemy of the unexpected. And if you're in a routine and most of us fall into routines, we do the same thing. We get up in the morning, we go in the same websites, we look at the same things, we do something similar, we take the same route to work every day, and deliberately introduce the random, the bizarre, the unexpected into your life. And that will get more unexpected outcomes. Another thing is meet different people. The people that you're close to are very interesting. I'm sure they're fine, but they know pretty much the same stuff that you do. And you have similar conversations when you meet them. It's when you meet somebody entirely new that you have a really unusual conversation and you learn something new. So meet different people deliberately, do different things deliberately every day.
Good advice there. And one of the things that you mentioned in the book, and we were discussing before we went online, is that I think the book it's a good book if you're in corporate life and you're working, but it's also good for general life. And I think one of the things that you sort of say throughout the book is, and we'll talk about more examples as we come on, it makes you a more interesting person. And if you're a more interesting person, you're probably more fulfilled and satisfied yourself, I would guess.
I think you have a more interesting life if you have more random, if you have more unexpected in it, and you're prepared to go with the flow and take advantage of those opportunities. Yes, absolutely.
I love that example you gave of having breakfast at dinner time.
Yeah, try a different route to work.
You sort of jarred a nerve there, because I snapped my tendon in this finger here about 2 months ago. In fact, the splinter's just come off, so it's still not quite right. But I'm a classical guitarist, and I wasn't able really to play the guitar. So I could have just said, that's terrible, I can't do it. But actually, there's some right-hand techniques. There's a particular technique called tremolo, where you play very fast with 4 of your fingers. And so I was able to spend a bit of time doing that.
Yeah, it's amazing how very often people who adapt to limited circumstances, restrictions, come up with clever ways to do things.
Mm. Another example I had when I was in sales many years ago was we had a team of representatives, and they would travel the same route to see the same customers and all the rest of it. And we suggested that they took different routes, and they were looking for builders, looking for construction projects, and we got a number of successes purely by people going along the back streets and seeing things they wouldn't have normally seen. Another thing that I found very interesting was, and you mentioned there about curiosity, and questions. If you've got a particular issue or a problem that you're working on, different ways of actually asking questions about them. And you gave some examples, and I'd like you, if you could, just to sort of embroider it a bit more. But what would an alien say about the question? What would a child say? What would Picasso or Dali or even the Dalai Lama say about it? And I tried that myself. I found that quite useful. Could you just explain to listeners what you're getting at there, please, Paul?
Well, there's a technique which I use in my workshops called personalities, where you take a problem and you say, how would a completely different personality approach this problem? Say you're the Minister of Health in the country and you want to improve health and reduce obesity and make people healthy. And you say, how would Salvador Dali approach this problem? And you come up with a whole bunch of ideas. And how would Joseph Stalin approach it? How would Steven Spielberg approach it? How would Taylor Swift approach it if she was in charge? And I'll tell you something which is incredible. You can put this into AI. And you can use AI to do a lot of the work. So you say, if Taylor Swift was Minister of Health, what ideas would she come up with in her style of thinking and approach? And it comes up with a whole bunch of ideas. And then Joseph Stalin, very, very directive and telling you what. And then, Spielberg, and off you go. And it's just forcing you to have a different point of view. And my favorite different point of view story concerns an Argentinian car mechanic, Jorge Odon. And he's a car mechanic. And a friend came round to him one evening and he said, I've got a problem for you. I bet you can't solve this. He said, if you push a cork into an empty wine bottle, can you get it out? And Jorge thought about this and he said, no, I don't know how you do that. And his friend said, well, I'll show you how to do it. And there's a video on YouTube that shows you how to do it. And what you do is you put a plastic bag into the bottle and you jiggle the cork around until it's partly in the plastic bag. And then you blow into the plastic bag and inflate it partially, and it grips around the cork, and then you can pull the cork out. And he thought, well, that's an interesting idea. And he went to bed that night. And in the middle of the night, he woke up with a brainwave. And the brainwave was this. He thought, getting a cork that's jammed in a bottle out of the neck of the bottle is just like getting a baby out of the birth canal of a mother when it's jammed in and it won't come out. And he went away and he developed a little invention called the Odon device, where you slip plastic around the head of the baby inside the mother, and then you inflate it and you can help pull the baby out. And he showed this to a lot of people. A lot of people said it's a crazy idea, it'll never work. But eventually he got backing for it, and Becton Dickinson manufacture it. It's now in use in many, many countries around the world because it's inexpensive and it's safe, and it's helped deliver many, many babies safely and saved many lives, I think. And the point about the story is this: he didn't approach the problem of childbirth from the point of view of a clinician, a doctor, a nurse. He approached it from the point of view of a car mechanic, and he said, getting a baby out of the birth canal is a mechanical engineering problem. Let's use a mechanical engineering device. Let's use this technique that works for a cork in a bottle for a baby. And by using a completely different approach, by coming at the problem from a different direction, he was able to come up with a very creative idea. And that's lateral thinking in action.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I suppose some people listening might say that that's great and they'd like to do it, but they perhaps read the book and they get inspired by it. How can they keep that muscle working? How can they develop that muscle to continue to do the things that you suggest they do?
Well, by deliberately introducing something new. Don't go back to the same place on holiday every year. If you normally go to the bridge club, go to the jazz club. If you normally watch BBC, watch Al Jazeera. If you normally read the Daily Mail, read Private Eye. I mean, deliberately do something which is provocative and different and makes you think differently. Meet different people. I said to my wife once, I said, I met this random chap at the golf club today. And she said, let me guess. Is he about your age? I said, yes. She said, is he white? I said, yes. She said, is he middle class? I said, yes. She said, he's not random. He's just like you. And it's true. We tend to meet people who are just like us all the time. And then we have conversations and, golf clubs stuffed full of people that are all very similar. And I went to an art gallery and I met the owner of the art gallery by chance. And he was completely different. And a completely different view of the world. And he started as an artist and then became a wealth advisor and an art dealer, and a completely different perspective on life and the world. So just meeting different people, going to different places, reading different, go into the library and pick a book at random from the non-fiction section. So a book you'd never read, take it home and browse through it, and you'll learn something new. And it may be something that you can apply to a problem you've got in your field.
So get out of your comfort zone.
Yes, get out of your comfort zone. We're all very comfortable in our comfort zones, every one of us. And it's just we get into a comfortable rut and we have a comfortable life, but it's not an interesting life. It's the same old. And the key to unexpected is to do something unexpected yourself, and that will trigger it.
And I guess you practice that on a regular basis yourself, Paul.
I would like to think so, but even I'd have to confess, I'm in a comfortable rut at times myself, and I catch myself doing the same thing over and over. It's true.
Yeah. And do you think the book is, or put it another way, who's the book primarily aimed for? Is it aimed for people in work or both, or people out of work, or what?
Well, originally I wrote it as a business book. A lot of my books are business books, and I wrote it with business managers and leaders and executives in mind. And a lot of the examples are in business, but there are a lot of examples in science and in the arts and in music and in warfare. There are examples when I started looking at the unexpected, and then I realized that it affects everybody. And I think anyone who's interested in self-improvement in life, in what's going on in society, could take this and say, yeah, it's true. And, the unexpected shapes history. If Franz Ferdinand hadn't taken that route to work in 1914 and been assassinated, the whole history of the 20th century would have been completely different. 2 world wars might have been averted. And it was all one unexpected event that led to his assassination. So, it's not just little things, it's big things, and it's our lives as well. So it was originally aimed at business, but I think it's a much broader appeal than that.
Yes, I think it is after reading it. And one of the things that comes up is you talk about being a polymath.
Yes.
And I'm particularly thinking, because I find him quite fascinating, for Leonardo da Vinci. And you look at somebody like Leonardo da Vinci with the amount of interests he had, and, art and science and nature. Do you think people who practice being that way inclined in terms of, looking at lots of different interests, do you think that they have a more fulfilling life and are able to solve issues and problems with much greater ease?
I think there's a lot of evidence for that, yes. And there are many examples. So Steve Jobs was interested in calligraphy and art, and he brought all of that to computing with the graphical design of the Apple computers. So it's... if you're interested in more than one field, there's a lot of evidence that scientists in particular who dabble in multiple fields come up with better solutions than one who just focus in one. And people who speak 2 languages think better and longer and survive dementia and Alzheimer's better than people who just speak 1 language. And my recommendation, particularly to people of my age, is to join U3A, the University of the Third Age, where they've got activities in all sorts of different fields, and just go and dabble. Learn to play an instrument. Just even if you've got some basic French or Spanish, go along to the conversation class and struggle, and go to and if you're not good at bridge, try it, and just exercise your brain in some different ways, and that's very good, because if all you're doing is watching TV and reading the same newspaper every day and going to the same websites and sitting in your chair, then that's a formula for a dull life, I think, and irrelevance. But if you're trying different things, experimenting, exercising, your brain is a muscle, and it's like I wrote a book called How to Be a Brilliant Thinker, and in there I made the analogy of the tennis player. And if you've got a tennis player who's got a very good forehand, but that's all, then they can cope. They can run around at the back of the court and hit a good forehand. They never come and volley. They never hit a backhand. They never hit a slice. And to be a good tennis player, they have to learn other techniques. They have to learn the backhand. They have to learn how to volley. And it's the same with our thinking. If we always think in the same style, we're predictable and routine. And if we try and think artistically and musically and mathematically and logically and laterally and all sorts of different ways, then it makes us more interesting and leads to a better life, I think.
One of the other themes that comes up in the book is this thing about challenging assumptions. And I'm guilty, as probably as other people are, where I make an assumption about people or a situation or something without really dissecting it and challenging it. And I can see that as a bit of a potential danger, really.
Assumptions are all around us, and the older you are, the more intelligent you are, the more experienced you are, the more assumptions you deploy. You can't get through life without making assumptions. When you get on a bus, you assume the bus driver knows he's competent, knows where he's going, and so on. When you get in an Uber, the same. But the whole reason that Bernie Madoff was so successful and scammed so many people out of billions of dollars was they made the assumption that he was a trustworthy financial advisor and could deliver these exceptional returns year after year, even though nobody else ever did. And they assumed, and because he turned down people who applied, he said, no, we're full at the moment. And that just raised the interest, and they were desperate to give him all their savings. And he was a scammer. And every scammer who's trying to scam you depends upon you making the wrong assumptions and not being cynical, not being critical, not asking the right questions. And they come on the phone and they say, I'm from your bank and you've got to move your money into a different account because of some, or I'm from the police and I'm from the credit card company. And they are dependent upon you. And the romance scam's just the same. You make assumptions that he's really an airline pilot who's flying and then he can't see you and he can't send a photograph, but he loves you dearly. And we look at, from the outside, it looks silly, but people fall for it all the time because of assumptions. And as you go through life, you've got to challenge assumptions and just say, is this really true? What if the opposite were true? And very often that will give you an insight.
And I guess a lot of it is actually sort of having the discipline to continually remind yourself to challenge assumptions. And would I be right in saying that if you start off doing that and make sure you're doing it every day, then that muscle memory starts getting used,
yes,
and it's easier to do?
Lateral thinkers challenge assumptions by asking questions all the time, and it's very difficult for people who are involved in a situation to realize that they've got assumptions which limit their ability to see new possibilities. We do it all the time. There's an old story about two little fish, young fish, who were swimming along, and an old fish came by them, and the old fish said to them, "Hi boys, how's the water today?" And one little fish turned to the other and said, "What's water?" How would a fish know it was in water? It wouldn't. And it's the same with us. And, if you were working for a taxi company, you would never have said as an idea, well, why don't we get rid of all the taxis and just have an app which puts people in who want a lift with people who provide a lift? And that's what Uber is. It's a taxi company that doesn't own a single taxi. And it challenged the assumption that taxi companies need taxis, which is, so basic that no one else would have thought of it. And Airbnb is an accommodation, a hotel company that doesn't have any hotel rooms. It doesn't own a single hotel room. And Marriott or, any of the big chains would not have thought of that idea because for them, the assumption was if you're in hotel business, you have to have hotels and hotel rooms.
Have hotels, yeah. Yeah. Have you met any of these people that have been very successful as a result of what you would deem to be lateral thinking? Have you met these people? And if you have, what sort of identity do they have?
Well, all sorts of people. There isn't one formula for successful people, but successful people are doers. They have an idea and they try it. And when it fails, they try something else. And their attitude is, yes, I can do it. Yes, I can learn from failure. Yes, I'm responsible for my own life and my own chances. And they're not comfortable with staying in a rut doing the same thing. They're risk takers. And they're
so somebody like Dyson, for example.
Yes, Dyson's a very good example. I mean, he did thousands of experiments before he came up with his bagless cleaner and so on. And he's created a lot of wealth by doing that. And same with Richard Branson, and same with Elon Musk. A lot of these people, they may or may not be nice people, but they're risk takers and they try things and they're comfortable with a degree of failure. They know that not everything's going to work. You have to kiss a lot of frogs to get one prince. So they're constantly trying lots of different things.
I wonder if a lot of us are afraid of taking these risks and afraid of failure because of our financial situation.
Yes, but there are many people who risk their life savings to start a business and it went on to succeed or fail. Most new businesses fail, of course. That's just a fact of life, unless you're doing something very, very safe. Like starting a hairdresser or something like that. But if you come up with a fantastic new idea, chances are it's not going to work. But it's still worth trying because very often it's the second or third or fourth idea which works. So the company that made Angry Birds, the very successful game, they had 52 games before that failed. It was the 53rd game that was successful. So very often it's trial and error. It's learning by experience. It's trying, failing, and then off you go.
One of the gold nuggets that I took away from the book was, and I've worked in companies where we've done this, the difference between observing customers and asking customers for feedback. Because the go-to, if you want to increase your sales and you want to find out how customers are with you, you put a survey together, or you get a little group together of customers to ask them. But actually observing customers, could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. So if you ask customers, how could our product or service be better? Which is a good question to ask, by the way. They'll come back with a whole bunch of incremental innovations, incremental improvements. So it could be easier to use, it could be easier to install, it could be available in German, it could be open on Tuesdays, it could be, made out of plastic, and made out of whatever. They'll come back with a whole bunch of incremental ideas, but they won't come back with a radical idea. They won't come back with something they don't anticipate. And the example I give is, say you were making spectacles in the 1950s. And you said to your customers, you've got thousands of customers buying this, how can we make our spectacles better? They might say, well, scratch-proof lenses would be nice. A flexible frame would be nice that I could bend, that was an anti-glare or something. They come up with a whole bunch of things. How many of them would have suggested contact lenses? None. Mm-hmm. Nobody would say, I want you to come up with a piece of glass that I put on my eyeball every morning. None. How many would say a laser eye surgery? I want you to cut through my eyeball with laser beams to change the geometry of my eyeball. None. No single customer would ever have suggested either of those. And that's why no optician came up with those ideas, or glasses manufacturer came with somebody else. So the really radical ideas come from outside, from lateral thinkers who just come up with a completely different approach. And if you've been working for Encyclopedia Britannica, and you'd ask the customers, what can we do with this? Make the books a bit easier to read, make them lighter, make them smaller, make them less expensive. Nobody would have said, come up with a completely free service manned by volunteers on the internet, where nothing is absolutely validated by experts. And that's what Wikipedia is. And Wikipedia wiped out Encyclopedia Britannica with a completely different model, completely different set of assumptions, which customers would not have predicted.
It's interesting when you look at somebody like Steve Jobs and Apple, the way that he would almost come up with products that the customers hadn't even envisaged.
That's right. He did not believe in focus groups and surveys. He eschewed those. And the best way is observing customers. And if you observe customers and you see what they're doing and what problems they have, then that's a very good approach. Or to take an entirely different approach and try it. And what they say is, the future's already here. It's just badly distributed. So if you've got thousands of customers, some of them are doing some really interesting things with your product that people in the future might want. They are the future. So it's not the average customer that you need to study. It's the extraordinary. And when Levi's sold their jeans, they found that a handful of customers were ripping them deliberately. And they thought, well, that's interesting. Let's bring out a line of ripped jeans. And others were lying in the bath and shrinking the jeans or giving them a stone wash. And these were things, really unusual things, but it gave them new opportunities. So by observing the customers and seeing these things, they were able to develop new lines and come up with better ideas.
Observation skills you talk about quite a lot. And I know, speaking from my own experience, I'm not the best observer sometimes. I'm in a world of my own, and I think we all are at times. Any tips for helping people, increase their observation skills and what the benefits are?
Well, yeah, it's very hard. I'm not very good at observing things. I was with my wife and she wandered off in the supermarket and I thought, what's she wearing today? So I can spot her, and I realised I didn't know. She just, I hadn't observed. And she's walking along with me. I haven't observed what she. So we just go through life missing things. And there are many examples. There's this famous video on YouTube where you can see where they have the basketball match, and you're told to count the number of passes. And then afterwards you say, did you see the gorilla that walked through? And most people, the first time they see it, didn't see the gorilla. Have you seen this one? And it's because they're counting the passes.
Yeah.
And it's famous because people don't observe what's going on because they're focused on something else. And it's a difficult thing to overcome, but you've just got to try and go through life like a detective and just look at things and say, what does that mean? What's going on here? What's unusual in this situation? And if you watch Columbo or any of these, but they're great observers, they observe details that everyone else misses. And I'm not saying we can be as good as that, but just try to observe more. And particularly if you're in business, observe what customers do and what problems they have, because every customer complaint is an opportunity for an innovation, I think.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And particularly if you get the same complaint.
Yes.
Multiple times.
Yes.
But and you're very good at telling stories there, Paul, and it's a subject that you talk about in the book, saying that it's good to be able to tell stories. They're more effective than lectures. How can people develop their storytelling skills?
Well, every story should have a structure, and the story, and I advise leaders to do this. If you want to change the culture in your organization, and most leaders do, say you want to make it less risk averse, less comfortable, more adventurous, more willing to experiment, then talk about people who've done it, and talk about yourself. A very powerful thing for a leader to do is to talk about some failures that they had and lessons they learned. When I was younger, I did this, I tried this, and it was a complete failure. And what I learned was so and this, and then I applied this and it helped. And that sends a powerful message. And I help job seekers looking for jobs. I volunteer at an organization called Springboard. And we prepare them for interview, and we say, prepare some stories, star stories, they're called. Because at interview, very often the interviewer will say, tell me about a time when you, and it's what's called a competency question. And they'll say, tell me about a time when you had a difficult boss, or you had an awkward customer, or you made a mistake and had to tell me. And I say, prepare the stories, but the story has a structure, and the structure is STAR. Situation, the situation I faced, the task, what I had to do, the action that I took, and the most important thing, the results are. Many people stop after the action. So I was faced with this situation. The customer was very unhappy. I was given the new customer. The task was to turn the customer, and the action I took was I brought in the engineering manager and the engineering team. We fixed his problem. The result was that we kept the customer. We got $100,000 worth of business from them the next year. And they prepare stories like this. And typically, if you look back, you can think of a number of situations where you've taken some action and there's been a positive result. And if you tell stories in meetings and tell stories about people who had difficulties and overcame them, and you say, John here, he tried something with this, it didn't work, but we learned a lesson from it. And that's what I like to see. So tell stories, and people relate to stories. Ever since we sat around campfires, in the Stone Age, we love stories, and that's how you tell people. And it's much more powerful than spreadsheets and slogans.
Yeah, I used to find when I did presentations at work, having pictures up
Yes.
of trees and forests, because I was in the timber industry, rather than just a spreadsheet or a graph, was much more effective.
Yes.
You mentioned about playing games in companies to encourage people's creative thinking. I'm just going to tell you about a little game that I played with some friends on a train, and I've done it somewhere else, which you might want to add to your arsenal.
Yes, please.
And it's great fun. Anybody can do this, and it's very simple. So we were on a train up to Edinburgh. There were 4 of us, including myself, and my particular head cushion wasn't. It basically came off. It had snapped off, and somebody had obviously put it back. So I took it off, and I was sort of thinking, well, what can you do with this? And we came up with must be about 50 different things you could do with this particular headrest. And it got really silly. So, what could you use it for? Oh, you could use it as a paddle or when you're learning to swim, you could have it at the front. And we went through loads of different things. Somebody even came up with, well, you could use it as a type of surfboard. You could sit on it. But it created a lot of humour, and it made the journey.
Yes.
And I guess that you're using the muscles, aren't you? You're using something in your brain to come up with ideas. And I guess that's a silly example, but I guess that's what you need to do. And some of your games probably do that sort of thing.
Yes, and there's a lot of evidence that play is good. And children learn through play, obviously, but we don't play at work. We seem to see it as something wrong. But very often when I'm running a brainstorm with a group, the first thing we do is play a game, an icebreaker, getting people to tell a lie, a big lie about themselves, which is plainly a fib. And once that mentally you're breaking the rules, you're breaking an inhibition which says everything has to be completely fair and honest and transparent. By breaking that, you're then enabling them to challenge all the shibboleths, all the assumptions and orthodoxies in their organization. So if you start with play, even a game, how can you use this headrest? How can we use this mug for something completely different? And the more bizarre ideas that you get, the better. And it just gets people using their imagination muscle again, something they used every day as a child, but they don't use much at work at all, the imagination muscle. So it's great.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Paul. Where can people find out more about the book?
Well, the book's available on Amazon and all good bookstores. So it's called The Art of Unexpected Solutions. And I think you'll enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it and like it, please leave a review.
Thank you for coming on the show, Paul.
I really enjoyed it, Bob. Thank you.
As we wrap up this conversation, Paul Sloane, I hope you're walking away with at least one fresh perspective, one idea that challenges how you've been approaching a problem or invites you to look at it from a completely different angle. Today we explored insights from The Art of Unexpected Solutions, Paul's book, which you can find details of in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a friend, colleague, or anyone who might benefit from a fresh way of thinking. Your support helps more people discover the show and join the conversation. As always, thanks for listening. I'm Bob Wells, and I look forward to being with you next time on Undercurrent Stories.